Allah is with the brokenhearted. As long as you keep your faith in God, He's with you. In that early period, and because of that, especially in the military area, the Europeans who benefited greatly from the Muslim knowledge. In fact, I think it's arguable that the hadith about one of the signs of the end of time is antarid al-amatu rabbataha. I mean, my personal interpretation of that, I haven't seen it from a scholar, but my personal interpretation of that is that the Islamic civilization gave birth to the Western civilization. And the Islamic civilization was a amma civilization. It was a civilization of servitude. But it gave birth to a civilization of hegemony, a civilization of rububiyyah that really took it upon itself to conquer nature, and instead of working with nature, to subdue nature. In fact, the metaphor that was used by Francis Bacon, who is really at the root of modern Western civilization. Francis Bacon is probably the single most important person in the change that occurs in Western civilization from a religious society to a secular society. I mean, he really begins that transformation. There are people before him, undeniably, but he's at the root of it when deductive reasoning was supplanted and replaced by inductive reasoning, and the scientific method becomes the only method of knowledge, which is only one aspect of knowledge. And so the Muslims had metaphysics, but they also had physics, and you need both to have a healthy civilization. So it's important, and the nice thing about this country is there is a lot of intellectual activity. And I spent last year, we had an evening one night with several of the Turkish scholars, and I was just really impressed to see them discussing a lot of the ideas in Western philosophy. They were, they'd read Heidegger, Habermas. They knew what postmodernism was. They knew what critical theory was, and I haven't seen that in scholars in other parts of the Muslim world. And those are important for scholars to be aware of, because these are the things that people don't realize that philosophy is at the root of what determines the worldview of civilizations. And so to ignore philosophy is really to ignore the worldview that is dominant in your civilization. And we have a hegemonic civilization that is having very, very negative effects on the environment. It's a belligerent civilization. It's a civilization that manufactures massive amounts of weapons and then spreads those weapons all over the world, and then really partakes in conflicts that happen as a result of those weapons. And so the Muslim civilization was traditionally a service-oriented civilization. It was a civilization that every enterprise involved serving the poor, free hospitals. The Muslims started a lot of the things that we take for granted in some of the more enlightened societies. And I'm talking more, not so much enlightened in terms of religious, but just in terms of social services, like the Northern European countries, like Norway and Iceland and Denmark. Iceland, I think, is probably one of the most intelligent secular societies out there. And they've done amazing things in their social welfare, prohibiting pornography, not on religious grounds, but simply on the common weal. It wasn't a healthy thing for a society. They're also one of the few societies that is truly middle class. And the Prophet ﷺ, even though he chose poverty over wealth, and he had the choice, he did that as a way of solidarity with poor people, which are the majority of people on the planet. but he preferred middle. He preferred the middle, what we would call the middle class. And I'm not talking about middle class in America, which is an extravagant, wealthy class, but middle class in cultures where people have enough. They have their basic needs are met. That's a middle class when your basic needs are met. I mean, middle class in the West is actually, would be considered a very wealthy class historically. I mean, the houses that a lot of us live in the West, if you go and visit King Abdulaziz's house the 100 years ago, if you visit his palace in Ta'if, which we did a few years back, it's actually far less impressive than most of the middle-class houses I've been in the United States. And that was a king of the Arabian Peninsula. So people today live like kings of the past. So we're here in Turkey, and this is a really difficult time for Muslims, as all of you are very aware. I don't think anybody here is unaware of a lot of the events that have been happening in the Muslim world. There's an incredible amount of suffering going on right down the road. And there's a helplessness, I think, that we all feel. Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman radiyallahu anhu once said that towards the latter days, the Prophet told him that towards the latter days, he said, يُخَيَّرُ الْمَرْءُ بَيْنَ الْعَجْزِ وَالْفُجُورِ, that people would be given a choice of being bad people or being helpless people. And one of the tabi'een said, قَبَّحَ اللَّهُ الْعَجْزِ, may Allah make ugly the helplessness, because these were Arab people, strong people. And Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman said, قَبَّحَكَ اللَّهُ أَنْتَ, may Allah make you ugly. Al-ajzu khayrun min al-fujur. Helplessness is better than profligacy. So the sunnah of helplessness, and our Prophet was helpless in Mecca. He was helpless at Ta'if. There's a sunnah of being helpless. And part of that sunnah is accepting your state. That is your state. It's helplessness. And it's a hard state to accept. But that is the sunnah of helplessness, is to accept your state and to call on God and to be content with the qadr. Because there's only two views on this planet. One is that we live in an orderly universe. And this doesn't just mean the heavenly orders or the orders of the seasons. The flowers bloom in an orderly manner. Farmers don't plant in winter. Farmers know when to plant because there's an order. If you plant outside of the season of planting, you're not going to harvest the fruit. They know that. And so the nature of God's world is order. And then there's the people that don't believe that this is a chaotic, disorderly planet with no order in it. The chaos and disorder that you see on the planet only comes from the chaos and disorder that's within us, that when we don't align ourselves with heavenly order. That's all it is. It's a manifestation of our own disorder. And that is because of sinfulness. It's as simple as that. If people align themselves with God, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala harmonizes their conditions. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah doesn't change the conditions of a people. مَا بِقَوْمٍ. He doesn't change the conditions of a people until they change what's in themselves. So this is takween and taklif. Amr takwini and amr taklifi. The conditions they're mukawwana, they're outside of the taklif. You can't determine your conditions. You can't determine your conditions. The people in Gaza did not determine their conditions. They were born into those conditions. We didn't determine our conditions. But what we can determine is what's in our nafs. That's where Allah has given us power. We can actually change what's in ourselves. And God says that when you get enough people to do that, He will change your conditions. That's His business. That's not our business. And part of the qalb al-haqa'iq, which is the inversion of realities that happens at the end of time, is that people are preoccupied with things outside of their power and completely unoccupied, completely negligent of things within their power. And so this is a huge problem with the human condition. So the time we're here is a short time. The Quran about ayyam al-ma'dudat, about Ramadan, it says that their ma'dudat is what they call jam'u qillah. You know, ayyam is jam'u qillah, that it's awqats, it's jam'u qillah. It's a plural of paucity. It's a few days. And so we're here for a limited amount of time, and we want to make the best of the time that we can and utilize the time, try not to waste our time. We're inefficient by our nature. And Allah's kataba alayna hada shay. I mean, this is something, even our bodies are working at about a 33-34% efficiency rate in terms of the usage of our caloric energy. Allah, that's His sunnah in creation. You know, a car has about a 7 to 10% efficiency rate. 90% of the car's energy is dissipated, it's just wasted. So humans are master time wasters. We're master food wasters. If you see the tonnage of food that's wasted on this planet, it's beyond belief. There was a lot of food wasted tonight. We waste food, we waste money, we waste time. But what we should do is make tawbah and get better and better, inshallah, at trying to utilize the time. Because as it's a diminishing commodity, if you want to use an economic metaphor, wal asri innal insana lafi khusr. By time, man is at loss because it's just dissipating. Life is a concatenant of moments. It's just one moment after the other. Allah, they called Allah, the scholastics in medieval Christianity called God the Nunc Stans. And I think they probably got that from Imam al-Jurjani. In the Ta'rifat, he says that God is al-an ad-da'im, the eternal now. God is in the present tense. And we are always in the present tense, but we're obsessed with the past and the future. We're in a state of khawf, about the future, fear. Everybody's in fear and trepidation. What's going to happen next? And then we have grief over the past. This is a human condition. The Prophet ﷺ sought refuge from these states. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-huzni, right? Min al-huzn, min al-hammi wal hazan. I seek refuge in you from anxiety about the future and hazan about the past. So he sought refuge in that state, from that state. So we have a short time, try to make the best of the time. People are obviously coming from different places. Some people were already in Turkey, so you have no excuses. And the only people that will be saved are people that call the call of somebody who's drowning. So, Allahu A'lam if this applies to our time right now, but certainly sounds like it. So we're in a difficult time, and I think a lot of people are almost, I worked in a intensive care unit, and sometimes we had comatose patients there, and it was always very strange when you change their IV lines, or because you'd poke them or draw blood or do all that, and there was nothing, no response. So it's a very strange thing to see somebody really comatose. But the ummah seems to be really comatose. We just get afflicted with so much. And we need to call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We really do. This is a time we should be calling the dua of the gharq. somebody who's drowning. Because that's the dua of the one who Allah will always answer their prayer. Yujib du'a al-mutar idha da'a wa yakshif as-su'. Allah will answer the prayer of the desperate, and He will remove their harm. And we should believe that. So, may Allah give you all a blessed time here. I hope you don't see anything that troubles you while you're here. I hope it's beneficial for all of you. And we should, during this time, just remember our brothers and sisters in Gaza, in Palestine, in Syria, in Iraq, Egypt, Libya, Yemen, the Central African Republic, China now, the Uyghurs are having difficulties. Somalia, that's been going on for a long time. Even Kenya, I recently met with a lady from Kenya, very, very high-powered Muslim lady. She has a very high position in the government, and she was in the United States visiting, and she came, had dinner with me and my family, and she said that she's from Kenya, from the Muslims of Kenya, and she said that the Muslims were always considered the most trustworthy community in Kenya. She said when she was young, all the Kenyans respected them. They were known to be honest as merchants. She said now they've begun to hate us. And she said it's very strange to see that happening, and it's coming from these really harsh manifestations of people that call themselves Muslims. I don't know where they get that idea, because the Prophet was anything but harsh. لو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك, فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم. It was a mercy from Allah that you were gentle. He was layyin al-arika. He was a gentle human being, and he really did not like violence. He was not a violent person. If you study his life, he was not a violent person. But he was a lion in battle when he was forced to. But he said, لا تتمنوا لقاء العدو in Sahih Bukhari. Don't desire to meet enemies. There's a sickness in that when you want to fight. It's a sickness. It's a sickness of young men in particular. Imr al-Qais in Sahih Bukhari, there's a section about fitna. It's in the Bab al-Fitna in Sahih Bukhari, and it said, the Sahaba said that whenever fitna, إذا اشتعلت الفتن, whenever fitna arose amongst the Muslims, we used to remember the lines of Imr al-Qais, the Jahili poet. This is in Sahih Bukhari, right? And the lines are about the nature of war. That when war shows up, الحرب أول ما تكون فتية تسعى بزينتها لكل جهول. That when war first shows up, it shows up like a beautiful young girl, seducing every young ignoramus. حتى إذا اشتعلت وشد ضرامها ولت عجوزا غير ذات حليل. Until when the flames erupt and it becomes the harshness of war, she turns out to be an old hag without a husband. That's what they used to, when fitan came, they would remind themselves, don't get pulled into this. So there's a lot of people suffering right now because of all these fitan that have happened in the Muslim world. And for those of us who live in bubbles, and most of us do, on the one hand, we have to be grateful for the bubbles that we're in. On the other hand, we have to be really aware those bubbles can burst very easily. That in some ways, why these tribulations are happening to these people is because they're actually people that are closer to God. Because the Prophet said, Ummati ummatun marhumatun ju'ila adhabuha fi dunyaha. My ummah is a ummah that is marhuma, that it has the mercy of God on it. And part of that mercy is that its punishment is in this world. And so when Muslims that are close to God, when they go off, they get it in this world. And our community has deviated very far from the teaching of our Prophet. فَلْيَحْذَرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ أَن تُصِيبَهُمْ فِتْنَةٌ أَوْ يُصِيبَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. Let them be warned who go against the guidance of this Prophet. Let them be warned. فَلْيَحْذَرْ. Let them be warned. If you deviate from the path of your Prophet, that this guidance he's given you, you will be afflicted with fitna and painful chastisement. So, may Allah have mercy on our ummah, on all of us, and may we keep them really in our hearts and in our minds. Make dua for them during the prayers. The Prophet ﷺ said, call on your Lord when your heart is brittle. In other words, if you cry for any reason, make dua. Even if you're crying, your pet cat died, and you start crying, make dua. Because the Prophet said that at that time, the heart's close to God. When it's brittle, when it's broken. Because when the heart breaks, there's room for the light of God to come into it. And that's why إِنَّ اللَّهَ عِنْدَ الْمُنْكَسِرَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ. Allah is with the brokenhearted. As long as you keep your faith in God, He's with you. And unfortunately, a lot of people in this time are losing their faith. And these are people that it's questionable whether they had any faith to begin with. Because the whole point of faith is not when things are going well. It's when it falls apart. That's when faith is real. So if people lose their faith when it all falls apart, you were just on the wheel of fortune. You were on the top and now you're on the bottom. So when fortune was kind to you, you remembered God. But then when fortune is unkind to you, and fortune's a fickle friend. So, alhamdulillah, we should all remember these people. And Afghanistan's another place that they've had 40 years now it's going on. The Prophet said, how will you be like when young people grow old in the same fitna? Fitnatun yahrumu fiha as-saghir. The young person grows old in it. So, but we have to be aware, it's really on your thing, it says the three, Iman, Islam, and Ihsan, the three dimensions of Islam. What is it? The three foundations of Islam. But there's really four in the Hadith Jibril that people tend to forget. And the fourth one is the signs of the end of time. And that is our deen. And so it's important to know the signs, to be able to read them. If you don't know the signs, when they come, you see the stop sign. If you don't know what that means, you keep driving and you get hit. So you have to know the signs of the end of time so that I know what this is. This is signs that we're getting closer. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. So we're certainly closer than the Prophet said, بُعِثْتُ أَنَا وَالسَّاعَةُ كَهَاتَيْنِ. I was sent and the hour is like this. That was 1400 years ago. So we know we're 1400 years closer, and at that time it was like this. So, but we're here, the Prophet said, if it comes and you're planting a seed, keep planting it. So we're people of hope. And Abu Yusuf on his deathbed, the great Hanafi scholar, was memorizing some masail, and one of his students said that you're about to meet your Lord and you're preoccupied with this. He said, I'd rather meet him knowing these things than being ignorant of them. And that's the way of our religion. It's no matter what, we keep doing it. Like the Chinese calligraphers when they were being attacked, and the master came out and said, "This is the time to do our calligraphy." They just kept doing their calligraphy. You saw hero. So that's what we have to do. Just keep doing the work, keep learning the deen. My dissertation is on Abdul Wahid ibn Ashar. And I read everything I could find on him. I read all the tabaqat literature. Alhamdulillah, I've read most of what he's written. And what I was amazed about was he lived the first 20 years of his life. He died at 49. The first 20 years of his life were some of the best times in Morocco. He lived under Mansour al-Dhahabi, and very peaceful time. But the second half of his life was all civil war and fitna. His city, Fez, was bombed several times. They used to have majaniq, they would throw fire bombs in. The city was bombed several times. He never mentioned anywhere I couldn't find where he mentioned the fitan. All he left behind is fiqh, aqidah, tafsir, tajweed. He was a master of tajweed. He has several books. Grammar, usul al-fiqh. That's what he left behind. Because fitan they come and they go. As long as human beings have been on this planet, trust me, the Mongols, what they did was much worse than anything that's happening right now in the Muslim world. Much worse. They didn't leave anything breathing when they came into the Muslim cities. They just killed everybody. It was much worse. The Muslims actually their faith got stronger. You look at the post-Mongol period of Islam, and it's great spiritual. Even this city, there's a sheikh here, Maulana al-Rumi, Jalaluddin al-Rumi. He fled the Mongol invasion. His father had some premonition and took them out. His city was destroyed after that, and they came here, and under the auspices of the Seljuks. So fitan come and go, but this stays. Knowledge stays. And that's what you're going to take with you. You won't take the fitan with you. When you leave this world, you won't take the fitan with you. But Allah says to you, Iqra warqa. Recite what you know and be raised in degrees. يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ دَرَجَاتٍ. Those who believe and are given knowledge, that's to have humility. أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ. Even though you have to earn it and work for it and struggle, it's still a gift from God. So inshallah, use this time to learn as much as you can. Try to implement as much as you can while you're here from the sunnah, to make things become habituated. And I'm going to talk about that a lot, about habit and inculcation of habit and things. So, jazakumullah khairan, subhanakallahumma bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Akramakumullah.